tonight is going to be Tom Adair and Lorenzo Sanchez. This is a very important race. In 2018, Sarah DePew only lost to Jeff Leach by 1,600 votes. That was a major change from in 2016, where the Democrat lost by 12,000 votes. So we believe that HD67 is primed and ready to flip. And we are ready and excited to see that happen here in Plano, here in Collin County, period. So tonight we're going to have the candidates come out. We're going to ask them several questions, 6 to 7 questions to be exact. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer and a 30-second rebuttal. Our timekeeper tonight is Caroline, and she will, as the candidates get to like the time when they're about to, if their time is about to expire, the background on her screen will go yellow and then red to just signify the time is expired. So with that being said, I would like to flip a coin so we can see who's going to be candidate A and candidate B. And do we have Tom and Lorenzo in here?
Yes.
I saw Tom. Lorenzo?
I'm here.
Okay, hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing well.
Okay, good deal. All righty. So I'm going to flip a coin. So who wants to call, heads or tails?
I'll give it to Tom.
All right, thanks, Lorenzo. Doesn't matter.
Good luck, y'all.
What's that? Who's has it?
Should I call now? I'll call tails, but I'm happy to go first or second. So.
Okay, so let's see. And it is tails. So Tom, you are the winner. So, well, not the winner, but you have the first. You're A. You're candidate A, and Lorenzo, you'll be candidate B. So the first question is, it's a two-part question.
Misty,
oh, no, sorry.
Are we doing
you're gonna. First of all, we're gonna do an introduction. I apologize. I jumped the gun. First introduction, that will go to Tom.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. My name is Tom Adair, and I'm running to be the next state representative here in Texas House District 67. And I'm running for the same reason that I walked into the Collin County Democratic Party office a few years ago and said, how can I help? And it's because our values are under attack. I believe we're all in this together and that we have far more in common than that which divides us. We need to come together to solve problems. I believe that we should lend a helping hand to those who are down, that we need to ensure equal opportunity. We must work to ensure justice is done, and we must treat each other with decency and respect. But lately, our leaders, the GOP, have been attacking these values, and we're seeing the consequences. We're living through a pandemic that has been grossly mismanaged by our governor and our president. We're seeing the consequences of the GOP's efforts and attacks on our government. Our government has been left crippled and unable to address this emergency. And the consequences have been needless deaths, job losses, career losses, business losses, educational opportunities that have been lost, life experiences that have been lost. We need better. But we have also been reminded how important it is to ensure that justice is done. And there is no justice until Black lives matter. And we aren't treating each other with decency and respect when we have leaders who point fingers, name call, and engage in lies and falsehoods. We came in first place in the primary by a decisive and definitive margin, and it's our message of unity, opportunity, and cooperation that really resonated with voters. And voters said experience matters, qualifications matter, relationships matter. I've been building those relationships in this community for years, and I've been doing the work, and I can't wait to get to work on behalf of this community in Austin. I look forward to talking about some of the critical issues and where we need to see significant change and how I am uniquely positioned to help bring about that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Now, Lorenzo, could you please give your introduction?
Hello, everybody. My name is Lorenzo Sanchez. I'm running to represent District 67 in the Texas House. I just want to start off real quick and thank Women Organizing Women, the Plano Area Democrats, the Richardson Area Democrats for hosting this event, and everyone who's tuning in out there in the virtual world watching this debate. I just want to start off by giving you guys some quick background about me and why I am so motivated and what brought me into this world of politics and wanting to be of service to my community. I wasn't born here. I was born in Chicago. Me and my sister were raised there by my mother, who came to this country as an immigrant herself at the age of 13, along with her 4-year-old brother, when they hopped on a bus and came to this country to search for their mother. My mother struggled financially when I was growing up. A lot of people hear about living paycheck to paycheck. Well, we were living disconnection notice to disconnection notice. My mother then decided to follow her baby brother, who she brought from Mexico here at the age of 13, down here to Texas. So here we would have a family, we'd have a place to stay, and we'd have some of the best schools, I believe, in the country. I was raised here in Plano. I was raised in HD67. I graduated from Plano East, along with my sister and more cousins that I probably am willing to admit. It's a lot of them. I worked 2 jobs through high school and college, the same way my mother did for the majority of her life. I started off here serving dinner at the Assisted Living Center on Spring Creek and Custer in Plano. And I also worked at Super One Foods, where the Home Depot now sits on Parker and Custer. So that's a little bit about me and why I care so much about this community, why I care about the safety and well-being of my family and of my neighbors. I really do care so much about this community because it's been what's molded me today. From my time working for the city of Plano, from the time also working at the city of Denver, I've been able to serve the health and well-being of those who I've been entrusted to serve. So that's what I want to bring to the Texas legislature. I believe that if we organize, we can make a Texas where we could achieve universal health coverage. I believe that we should be fighting for schools, for our teachers, and for our students. I believe in a Texas where we can focus on the environment and also create thousands of high-paying jobs. And I believe that Texas values equality, that Texans value justice and freedom. And I believe that all of that can be achieved if we organize and demand it. This is what my campaign has always been about: healthcare, education, climate, and building a Texas for the future, which includes voting rights, criminal justice reform, and removing the influence of money in politics. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm really happy to be speaking, and I'm happy to be in this virtual debate tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorenzo. Okay, so I failed to mention earlier, just let me give you a little bit more housekeeping. We have 6 to 7 pre-selected questions. Feel free to add questions in the chat if you would like to, if there are some questions that you would like to ask the candidates, and we will go through those and your question may be selected to be added at the end. So with that being said, let's get started with the first question. And Tom won the coin flip, so he will be candidate A. Question number 1. How would you fill the budget hole that the drop in oil prices is going to cause? How are we going to meet our state's needs with such a drop in revenue? It's actually a 2-part question. Tom?
Sure, thank you, Misty. The upcoming legislative session could be the worst in the history of the legislature. I have heard some state representatives say that and others who are observing, and that is because of the dramatic budget constraints we are going to be experiencing and the difficult choices we're going to have to make. We were already looking at some difficulties because of HB3, which was an important step in the right direction for our schools, but the legislature only provided a one-time funding for that boost in funds for our schools. So we were already facing a challenge in figuring out how to continue the funding of HB3 moving forward. And now it's going to be much more acute because of the loss of sales tax revenue and also the oil and gas production taxes. The comptroller has not told us what that budget deficit looks like. He has announced that he will make his announcement in mid-July. That's when we'll start to have a better idea of how dramatic the drop is. But from the beginning of this campaign, I've been talking about closing the equal and uniform property tax loophole to raise revenue. That could raise about $3.5 billion based on some estimates. I've talked about healthcare reform as one option that would actually more than pay for itself. And additionally, we're going to have to look at eliminating a lot of exemptions and carve-outs to sales tax and property taxes. The comptroller has estimated that we could find $60 billion by closing some of those loopholes.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
I agree with a lot of what was said already. I think that there's places where we can continue to try to find new revenue streams. I don't think the answer is always just increasing taxes. It's trying to find new ways of making sure we can get certain amount of money added to our budget. So we should be looking at things like the legalization of marijuana. We should also be looking at the increased sales tax. I know that's what they did in Utah when they expanded Medicaid in order to provide that percentage which the state was going to have to pay. I think if people are guaranteed something like access to health care, that offset from how it really does end up punishing the poorest among us on sales tax increases is something that we also need to look at. But I agree as well with the uniform and equal tax. We need to make sure that property owners and industries are paying their fair share of tax and not letting that fall on the back of homeowners. I don't know if my time was up or not, but I'm done.
Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. You had like 10 seconds left. I just hit the wrong button.
It's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I guess I have 30 seconds here. I just heard my runoff opponent propose a sales tax increase, which I think is very alarming. A sales tax is the most regressive form of taxation, and it would hit our low income families harder than it would hit anyone else. I am very opposed to a sales tax increase. Republicans proposed that last legislative session, and it was shot down. And Democrats did a fantastic job of explaining that that was an 18% increase that Republicans were pushing, an 18% sales tax increase that would hit our low income families hardest.
I guess I have 30 seconds too now.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so the question we were asked is where we could find revenue. And I just use that as an example to show what other states have done to make sure that we are expanding Medicaid. I know that it's something that's very important for our state, and it's very important for the economy of Texas. We can't lose another $100 billion the next decade that are going to be lost in federal funds if we do not take Medicaid expansion. So I'm willing to look at any way possible to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Question number 2. What do you believe the state would do, if anything, what do you believe the state should do, if anything, to assist businesses struggling due to COVID-19? You would go first, Lorenzo. Can it be?
I think they need to do a number of things. I think we see a lot in Europe and how they've been able to control their unemployment rates throughout some of those countries because they were very focused on making sure that they were taking care of people and they were taking care of small businesses. So what we need to do is make sure that we're putting in place a bottom to make sure that we're catching those people and helping them be able to pay their bills. So there's things that I would want to do in order to help people immediately. That's with rent freezes, making sure that we're not evicting people during this crisis, making sure that we're not turning off their power and electricity. Those are things that I also would think that we should expand into small businesses to make sure that we're taking care of them. We know that plenty of small businesses are going to go under because our federal government has been useless at trying to solve any of the problems that are going on right now economically for every common day person. So we need to make sure that what we do as a state is focus in on those areas where our politicians here in Austin and in Washington as well, that they've been ignoring. So let's start and make sure we're taking care of people, and that we're taking care of small businesses to make sure that when they come back, they can come back as strong as before COVID even began.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for that question. And this is a really important issue right now. Small businesses in particular are struggling, and our small businesses are kind of the lifeblood of our communities, and they are responsible for most of the employment in our communities. So it is important that we provide our businesses with the resources and support that they need. First and foremost, I'd start with clear communication. Maybe my biggest problem with the horrible leadership and the mismanagement we've had in this state during this pandemic is the mixed messaging and the horrible communication about what is expected of people, of our businesses, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is open, what is not open. And we've seen businesses in some cases flaunt them. I know obviously we're worried about the spread of COVID as the numbers are skyrocketing here. We see pictures of bars and dance halls that have been jam packed, and some of those have been closed. So it starts with clear communication. I think we need to give businesses some flexibility, and property owners, give them some flexibility on their property taxes, but only if they also assist their tenants in terms of making rent. I think that's an important thing too. We've also seen that the federal government has provided some support, but it hasn't been ideal, and we're losing some of that in terms of, and I'm talking about support, payroll support. So we need to be taking steps like that.
Thank you.
I was going to say, as a
Lorenzo, you have a 30-second rule.
Yeah, as a small business owner and experiencing trying to run an election, obviously, but also get back to work, after the primary, I faced a lot of those struggles of being, locked away at home when I need to be out there meeting clients and talking to people and make sure that I'm keeping my business afloat. So I think it's something that we saw that was grossly mismanaged. All of those relief programs from the government, the people that needed it the most were the ones that had the most trouble getting that fund. So I think that's something that was purposely done that way and something we need to address.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tom?
Thanks. I'm a lawyer and sole practitioner, so I am a business owner too, and know some of the struggles in terms of making ends meet. And I have family who own businesses. My sister and her husband run a company, and it's been interesting talking to them about their struggles and how they've been resisting at all costs having to let people go. But they are also looking at a steep decline. So it's also about engaging with our business community. I've been going to Chamber of Commerce meetings for a long time, and we're going to need to work with the Chamber and other local businesses.
Thank you, Tom. Question number 3. When schools open back up in August, there will likely be a large influx of child abuse cases reported to the state, leading to more children placed in state custody. However, there's already a shortage of safe foster care homes available. What would you do to expand the number of safe places for children in the state's care? And we'll start with you, Tom.
Thank you for that question, Misty. And this is a really critical issue. We've had a foster care system that has been downright criminal in this state. And there's been a lawsuit brought by several groups on behalf of children, and that has found that their constitutional rights have been violated because our foster care system is in such dire straits. And just, I believe last week, 2 independent monitors submitted their report that despite all these efforts and despite the federal judge in Fort Worth, Janice Jack, I believe, holding the state in contempt for its failure to actually improve the situation, these independent monitors said things really haven't improved. And the problem there is that we have overworked CPS workers who don't have access to their children and aren't able to see them often enough. So that is a big problem. We need to try and invest even more in ensuring that we have caseworkers who are able to see their children. We have a privatization effort that's going on in the state that is really problematic because it screws up the incentives. These private companies that are now running much of the system have either an incentive to keep kids in care or to get them out, depending on how those financial incentives are set up. So it's a really tricky thing, and we're going to have to work to expand the options and ensure that CPS workers can see their children and ensure no abuse.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
Yeah, I think the privatization of some of this work is very bad and dangerous. We need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to provide good, safe homes for these children. We need to make sure that we can do everything within our power as a state to provide the support for these workers that are given heavy caseloads and sometimes not given the proper resources in order to handle some of the cases that are more difficult that they're dealing with. So this is just something that we're going to need new leadership really that wants to focus on finding these solutions. It's going to come to us working together, party lines, and trying to get certain things passed with agreements that certain areas will get certain things, but this is an issue that we can come together and tackle. It's ridiculous that we would rather pay fines to the state and to the federal government as opposed to making sure that we are doing right by our children here in Texas. So I just think that we need to make sure that we start electing Democrats to get the job done and start putting a focus on these issues and make sure that we actually do something as a state and a legislature.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tom, you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that Sarah Dupuy, the prior nominee in this seat, is a former, she worked in the foster care system and she is a true expert on this issue. And I commend her for her work. If you read the Dallas Morning News editorial about this race last election, they talk about how it was great to see the discussion between her and Jeff Leach. And I believe they may allude to the fact that Jeff didn't really know much about the foster care system. We need to focus on ensuring a safe place for our children, and that's number one.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
No rebuttal.
No rebuttal? All righty. Question number 4. Texas's frontline workers, people who have continued to work at jobs that put them at risk of catching COVID-19, including healthcare workers, building and cleaning services, social services, public transit, grocery and delivery, and warehouse workers are predominantly women and people of color. What steps should the state legislature take to ensure that these vital and vulnerable workers are taken care of? And we're going to start with you, Lorenzo.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, it's just making sure that we address some of these issues. If you think about it, think about some of these workers that work in some of these jobs. They may not make enough money just with that job to be able to sustain their family. So they be working 2 or 3 jobs. And if they lose that job, even if they start feeling sick, they may still continue to go to work until they physically can't, because the decision between them being able to feed their child or them not going to work is not one that they can make. So those are the kind of things that we need to understand are going on within families in our community. And with that understanding, we need to be fair and let them know that they have that support, that if they are getting sick, they can take time off and make sure that they get well and they'll still be paid so they can come back and continue to work safely and still provide for their families. I think it's something that's really important for us to make sure we're doing. I'm speaking to a lot of doctors within the community. I know that Collin County is underreporting positive COVID testing from multiple doctors that I've spoken with. And it's just something that we need to get under control. This is something very serious. We need to continue to talk to our neighbors, talk to our family about keeping safe during COVID. This is not over. And hopefully we'll get some sort of vaccine soon.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Misty. And this is a critical issue. And this pandemic has emphasized and shown a light on the fact that about the vulnerability of our working families and minorities in particular, especially our frontline workers, as you talk about. I believe we need to incentivize good behavior from companies. One option would be to incentivize them by giving them a payroll holiday of sorts from the payroll taxes. Now, this might be something that would actually have to be handled at the federal level, but as long as they're then giving that money back to their frontline workers, we need to make sure that our businesses are equipped with PPE. I guess I am still angry that we don't have adequate PPE in this state and at the federal level to protect our workers and our healthcare workers, of course, too. That is something that we need to do. We need to expand healthcare in this state, expand Medicaid. That is critical, and it's so frustrating that we haven't. I think it's a moral imperative, and it's the fiscally responsible thing to do as well. And finally, I support paid sick leave along the lines of something like what Dallas has done, providing a paid sick leave program. That is something that I do support and think we need to advance.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my mother has worked 2 jobs, most of them at local grocery stores. I worked at Tom Thumb, Central Market, Super One Foods, like I mentioned. So I know how hard and how tiring those jobs are. The pay isn't great. So we need to make sure that we're taking care of those people. We see how important they are during this time of COVID. And I also believe that, we should do Medicaid expansion, because I believe that healthcare is a human right. I believe my competitor as well said that healthcare is a human right at our last debate on March 1st. But then he said that would be something he would compromise on. That's frustrating. I definitely do not believe we should be compromising on Medicaid expansion.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Just to clarify, I've never said we'd compromise on Medicaid expansion. I don't know what he's referring to. I do note that you do have to work with 149 other legislators in the Texas House in order to get things done, and we're going to be dealing with a Republican legislature. So it is going to be important to have someone who understands the realities and the issues and can get it done. But I think back during this pandemic to my times working at a vegetable stand growing up and the interactions you have with people. So taking care of our frontline workers is important and something I understand.
Thank you, Tom. Question number 5. In the aftermath of George Floyd's murder at the hands of police, many Black Lives Matter activists have called for defunding police departments. This can take on many meanings, from reforming police to actually reducing funding, or even dismantling and rebuilding police forces, as Camden, New Jersey did. What is your view on defunding or rethinking the police? And we'll start with you, Tom.
Thank you, Misty. And this is an urgent issue and something that we are faced with, and that is, we've been told and reminded how important this is. And I have marched and I have stood at vigils, marches, and protests with those who have been calling for justice and saying that Black Lives Matter. This is a critical issue. And one of the things I've learned by listening to those people who speak and participating in those many marches is our police are also hurting right now. When I first heard defund the police, my reaction was, oh my God, we can't disband the police. But when you learn that that's not exactly what is being talked about, it becomes something that's more understandable. And I think all good organizations regularly evaluate whether or not they are using their resources in the most effective way possible to accomplish their mission and their goals. And I do think we should be evaluating whether or not our police are accomplishing their goals in the most effective way possible. Our cities as well. I believe that we need a program that focuses on and reforms that involve police tactics, banning chokeholds, for example. We also need to ensure that there is transparency. I support Representative Carl Sherman's bill, Bo's bill that he's about to introduce regarding body cams. We're going to need to work on accountability, and then finally opportunity. And I've talked with local young men about their sense of lacking opportunity here, and we need to provide that opportunity for folks.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
Yes, I think we need to look at everything, really. Look at the entire system and see what we can do to make sure that we're building something that we can be proud of. Our criminal justice system right now is broken, it's financially irresponsible, and it's overly punitive. So we need a system that, seeks out to help the victims and reform the offenders of crimes. And I think that's something that we can build here in Texas. We need to look at abolishing things like private prisons, cash bail, mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent offenses. I think we need to look at everything. We need to look at some of our drug laws and how those are affecting our communities of color. Also, people are ending up in jail for nonviolent marijuana offenses when they could be living in any other state in a majority of the country where the rest of the population lives and wouldn't be tried or imprisoned for something like that. So I think it's something that we need to look at. Also, you were talking about police training and things like that. Like I said, qualified immunity. We need to be able to look and make sure that anyone who's committing any form of misconduct can be looked at and made sure that they could be held accountable for their actions. It's something that we all need to really, really take a hard look at, because these are people's lives. There's not a second to waste.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tom, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Sure, I would just mention, I know from the beginning of this campaign, I have been in supporting efforts to reform our cash bail system. I think that is urgent, and it's very disappointing that the legislature hasn't done that already. There's a lot of bipartisan support for that. Dallas County judges are already doing it. We need to focus on rehabilitation, decriminalizing marijuana, which would also save us money and help with this budget crunch by not locking up people for possession of small amounts of marijuana. And we need conflict de-escalation training, amongst many other things.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
Yes, also diversity training, going along with that de-escalation training, making sure that they understand that there are people of different religions, of different backgrounds, different ethnicities that may not always react the same way that we always expect the people from within our culture to react. We also need to make sure that we're providing training for police officers to be able to properly communicate with people with disabilities. We don't want people dying on the street just because we make a mistake. We want to make sure we're doing everything, and that's something we can do to help police officers.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Question number 6. Recapture has significantly reduced the operating budgets of public schools across Texas. How do we more equitably fund public schools, given that we will see reduced funding from property taxes and reduced revenue from the state, not to mention a pandemic? And we'll start with you, Lorenzo.
And those are one of the things, I guess, we were talking about where we can see budget increases. Those are the kind of areas where we really will have to compromise with our Republican and independent and more moderate individuals in the House to make sure that we can get education taken care of. This is going to be a huge issue because of what's happening with COVID, and also because of the budget shortfalls that we're going to have. We need to build a system where the state is actually paying its fair share to these districts to make sure that we are providing the requirements that they're going to need to build successful lives. So something that is a big focus to me. I give so much credit to my education for putting me in a place where I could even be doing something like this. super proud to be a graduate of the Plano school system. And now I want to fight for people. I want to make sure that we can build an education system in Texas that we'll be proud of, not one where we're, dead last in pupil funding. And even when they increased with this last session, our education funding, we're still in the bottom half of per pupil spending. So it's something that we can do better as Texans, and we deserve better as a community. Our teachers work so hard. Let's make sure we're going to work just as hard for them in finding these solutions. And that could be in any form. If it comes from an increased revenue of being able to, sorry, my time's up.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tom?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Public education is something very near and dear to my heart. I'm the product of public schools. My mom was a public school teacher for 28 years. And I've had former students and families of former students come up to me and tell me how much my mom changed their lives. So it is something that is critical. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Texas Parent PAC, which is a big pro public schools organization in this state. And so we need to make sure that our schools have the resources they need, that our teachers have the resources, and that our children have the resources they need to thrive. HB3 was a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, it largely left the two school districts in this district behind. Allen and Plano ISDs did not see the huge increases in funding that they expected and that most other districts received. And the one benefit that Plano did experience is their recapture bill went from about $255 million down to $160 million. So the recapture bill is not as large, but we do have to make sure that our schools have the resources they need, but recapture is something difficult. If this was an easy problem to solve, it would already have been solved. Recapture happened because of court cases that found that the funding of our schools in the state was unconstitutional. I look forward to working with my colleagues to get this fixed.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
Yes. I just want to reiterate what I was saying before, that we should not be cheating our students. This is something that's so important. This is why people come, at least to our area here in Collin County. That's why we see so many families travel here. We have some of the best schools. We need to make sure that we're taking care of our teachers, offering them the support that they need, making sure that their retirement that we're promising them is going to be adequately funded when they get there. And we need to make sure that our students feel safe and in a place where they feel like they can actually learn.
Lorenzo? Tom, did you have a rebuttal for that?
Sure. I just want to add to what I said there about HB3 being a step in the right direction. Part of the reason the recapture bill for Plano, for example, is better is because the state is now paying its share or more of its share of the education costs. But as I said, we do face some real hurdles. They did not have a permanent funding mechanism for this level of funding of our schools moving forward. And we're going to be facing a budget deficit in this next session. We're going to have to be looking at those ways to increase revenue that we talked about earlier.
Thank you. Okay, question number 7. What is your plan to provide home and community-based services to people with disabilities who would rather live in their own homes instead of institutions and congregate settings? First up, Lorenzo.
Yeah, this is, again, I have the endorsement of the Texas Democrats with Disabilities. I have a niece, Victoria, who has epilepsy and is completely in need of care constantly. And this is something that a lot of people are facing. I think if that is something that they want to do, is stay within their own homes, it's something that we should be trying to do as a state. Trying to make sure that we are letting our elderly live out their last years in the most comfortable manner as possible, and try to support them in that way. But also we need to be looking at some of the organizations and the treatment of some of our elderly, and make sure that they're not being taken advantage in some of these homes, which is another huge issue that I heard has been arising. So it's a very complicated issue. I think that they should be able to use federal funds to be able to live on their own if they are able to do so. Otherwise, I believe that that they should also be able to have that option, hopefully, of going somewhere and live in some sort of group environment, and still receive, that adequate amount of care, that necessary amount of care that they need to be able to live fulfilled lives.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tom?
Thank you. And I agree that this is a challenging topic. Historically, the state has 13 state-supported living centers, the SSLCs, that house people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But there's been a movement away from those. And generally, those in the disability community want to see smaller, more localized opportunities for people to live closer to home and in their communities. The SSLCs are actually, I believe, the largest budget item in the health portion of our budget. So the healthcare portion of the state budget is the largest budget item in the state, and then the largest sub item in there is the SSLCs. I do support finding new ways to allow people to stay in their homes and not necessarily go to the SSLCs, although those SSLCs provide a critical resource for families who cannot care for those who have these developmental and intellectual disabilities. But I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Collin County Democrats with Disabilities. They're doing a phone bank for me this week. Really happy to have their support. I talk with them a lot and go to their meetings to understand the issues that they're facing, and also accessibility issues is something that's been very helpful for me. I think I'm a big person that believes in listening and learning, and I'm doing that with the disabled community too.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, I just see the struggles that people face with disabilities every day, and we can just do so much better as a community, as a state, to make sure that we're living up to the ideals that we really talk about and we really do believe in. I think it's just important that we make sure, and it's across the board, it's not just with healthcare, it's with education, that our state is constantly pushing aside people with disabilities. So I think it's time that they have a voice in Austin, and I look forward to being that voice.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tom?
Yeah, I just agree with Lorenzo in the sense that, I look forward to working on these important issues. They are things that are important and that we need to address. Like I said, I believe the SSLCs are one area that are going to be interesting because they are only 60% occupied. There are some proposals where we could consolidate some of those and find revenue savings, which maybe we could then move into more community-based care along the lines of what the question posed.
Thank you. So our chat room has been very busy. We have a lot of questions that have come in. So we've selected a few. The first one is from Sarah Mitchell from Moms Demand Action. Sarah asks, so she says, the Texas legislature made it easier in the last legislative session to obtain and own a gun. The senator and representative from El Paso introduced a red flag law that went nowhere thanks to Republicans. And that was before their city was rocked by a massacre fueled by racism. How will you gather support to pass a red flag law? And let's start with you, Tom.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Misty and Sarah. This is critical. We are facing a gun violence epidemic in this state, and it is maddening that instead of working to ensure that those who cannot handle a firearm responsibly don't have access to one, that our state legislature has been making it easier for people to access guns, to carry them, and to use them in ways that intimidate others. There is overwhelming support. There's 81% support in this state for universal background checks, and 68% of all Texans support red flag laws. I will be focusing on the fact that we have a large majority of the population behind red flag laws and universal background checks when working with Republicans in the state Senate in particular to urge them to bring about this much needed change. But what the question alludes to is the story I think of. The shooter in El Paso came from this district. He was radicalized in this district, and then he went and took 23 lives. And a red flag law could have stopped him because his mom called the police in Allen and said, I'm worried about my son. He's got a gun that I don't know if he should have it. And the police were powerless to act. If we had red flag laws, 23 lives in El Paso might have been saved.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo?
Yeah, it's hard not to take it so seriously when you know you have nieces and nephews in schools, and and you're friends with lots of teachers, and you know that the shooter came from this community. But it's something that's been going on for a while. Gun violence is spreading throughout our community. We had a cheerleader, Anaya, from Allen High School, who was shot down while in the mall parking lot. We had the shooter who decided to go to El Paso to commit his heinous murders, but he could have just as easily have chosen a diverse Walmart up here. It could have just as easily have been me or my family that he was aiming at that Walmart. This is something that we need to address. We have so much common ground on this. We see that the polls are in our favor. We just need to elect representation that is not going to be afraid. Not going to be afraid to take and be that 51 vote on something like this, because this is so important. This is our job as representatives, and once elected, to come back, if you do the right thing, come back and sell that to your constituency. Let them know that you're looking out for their better interests and that you're going to have the best interest of everyone in our community and the safety of everyone in your community first in mind. There's a lot we can do to make sure that we're keeping guns out of hands of people who want to hurt themselves or hurt someone else.
Okay, our moderator, Misty Irby, has been temporarily kicked out. So while she's trying to come back in, I will go ahead and ask a question or two in her absence. Hopefully she'll come back quickly.
And Debbie, I wanted to actually add to that. I think I had a rebuttal there of 30 seconds.
I'm so sorry in all the confusion. Go ahead, Tom.
No worries, I totally understand. I think the question was, how are we going to make this happen? And I talked about the polls and how much support there is in the public. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be talking about lives. And that's what I'll be talking with the Republicans who have in the past resisted gun safety measures. Gun safety was the top issue that I heard from voters when I knocked on their doors in the fall. I think of the family the retired couple who raised gun safety as their top issue because they have a daughter who's a teacher. I think of the stories I heard from Allen High School students at a school board meeting and how terrified and paralyzed they are by the fear of violence and how that impedes their ability to get a good education.
Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, Lorenzo gets a rebuttal as well. So Lorenzo?
Yeah, we need to strengthen our red flag laws, make sure that people have easier access to mental health resources, everything we can do in order to try to stay safe and stem some of this violence. We also need to encourage those conversations to be happening amongst people in our community. Don't be afraid to ask your neighbors before your kids go over to their house if they have firearms and if they're securely stored. But yeah, we're going to have to come together and work, and hopefully we can do that this session. We're going to have lots of new faces, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. All right, so at this point, we're at 7:55, and we do have a few more questions from the chat box. So would both candidates like to stay about another 10 minutes and answer a few more questions for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay. How about you, Lorenzo? You good?
Yep.
Okay. All right, we have a question from Phil Lucia. I have a 6-year-old in the Texas public school system. I think it's ridiculous that our state law mandates abstinence first sex ed. Will you work with other Democrats to take action and change Texas law so our kids can receive comprehensive, data-driven sex education that's inclusive of LGBT kids? And we will have Lorenzo go first because Tom went first on our first chat question.
Yes, I would encourage that. So a lot of that gets done by our school boards. I actually was on a chat over the weekend with Brenda. I believe she's running for school board place 8 or 6. I'm sorry about that, out in East Texas. And that's something that she was talking about, because being an educator herself and then having her kids go through the system, she's aware that our children require maybe more than abstinence education in order to try to make sure that we're stopping the spread of diseases, that we're giving our children the proper information so they can make responsible decisions, while also making sure that we don't cause any sort of health crises. But it's really important that we, teach our kids and make common sense and what's going on in the real world available to them through education.
Okay, and now Tom, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Sure, and the simple answer to that question is yes, I do support fact-based, science-based sex education, and I will support measures to do that. I want to correct something that was just said. Our school boards don't control the curriculum that is taught in our schools. That is handled at a state level, largely by the State Board of Education, but the state legislature certainly has a hand and the ability to speak on that issue, and that's something that I expect to be working on, because I do believe that we need to have comprehensive sex education that is fact-based and science-based. I think we need to empower women and all of our youngsters to take control of their health and their bodies. I do believe that we also need to have access to low-cost contraception that empowers people to take control of their own health. I look at Colorado, where they expanded access to contraception dramatically, a program. Unwanted pregnancies dropped by 60% amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. We just need to equip our children with the knowledge and the resources they need to have control over their own bodies and their own future.
Okay. All right, Lorenzo, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I apologize for saying school board. I meant State Board of Education, place 8, Brenda, who's running for that. So yeah, I still believe that we need to make sure that we are making proper sex education available to our students, that we're having those kind of conversations with our parents as well, talking about the importance of making sure that we're teaching science-based information to everyone so they can make their own decisions.
Okay. All right. And Tom, 30 seconds to rebut.
And I just want to add that I do support sex education that is inclusive of all Texans. And that includes, obviously, LGBTQ plus individuals and children. I think starting with that education is critical to also helping build respect and understanding amongst our children and our community and advance the cause of equality in this state.
All right. Okay, we have our third question from the chat. We have a lieutenant governor in Texas who sponsors a weekly Bible study for legislators that teach that the cure for racism is converting everyone to Christianity, written by a man who has called Catholicism one of the primary false religions of the world. How do you advocate advancing secular government in a state run by fairly extreme elements of one sect of one religion? Tom, you have 90 seconds.
Sure. And I don't think that religion can't inform decisions of some people and decisions of the heart. I'm always frustrated when I see people pound the Bible to justify some of some hateful rhetoric and actions. And that really bothers me. And I think the lieutenant governor has done that in very much so here. You know, I am a Christian, and one of the things that is taught in the Bible that is so important is to love thy neighbor. Above all else, have faith in your God and love thy neighbor. And I think that's the type of belief that you will see across all religions, and is something that is good for all of us to believe in. And I think we need to foster policies that take care of each other. And while we can be informed as individuals by our religion, we can't use religion as a cudgel to beat other people and just tolerate hate, discrimination, and other very distasteful and inappropriate conduct. Again, I truly do believe, and it sort of informs me most, that we must love thy neighbor.
Okay, Lorenzo, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Yes, I'm religious as well, so it's something that is, serious to me. I follow faith, but I will never use my religion in order to try to discriminate against anybody else. That's where the buck kind of stops there for me. I'm so blessed to have received the endorsement of the Texas Democratic Secular Caucus. They believe in the fact of my representation and how that would benefit people of religion, non-religious, and atheists alike. And that's something that I'm very proud of. Because of my religion, it does cause me to want to be of service to my community, but it makes sure, like I said, the buck stops where it comes to discriminating against the rights of other individuals, or even pushing my religion on anyone. So that's something that, as a legislature, I'll make sure that we are respecting people of all faiths or no faith at all, and making sure that we're representing everybody equally.
Okay. All right. And Tom, you've got 30 seconds.
I would just simply add, something that I mentioned at the very beginning of my opening there, and that is that one of the values that has always driven me and that got me involved again working for local Democrats and the Democratic Party is this belief that we have far more in common than that which divides us. And that is one of those messages that I've driven home, is one of unity, one of honesty about the facts, but bringing people together and being respectful of each other. And that is critical. And I think those values are what I talked about in my opening.
Okay. All right, Lorenzo, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just need to make sure that we are doing everything with integrity and with unity, and making sure that everybody understands we need to know what our legislators are going to be doing behind closed doors in Austin. And if we can't trust them in front of our faces right now, we definitely cannot trust them behind closed doors.
Okay. And thank you, everybody. And we do have our moderator, Misty Irby, back. Welcome back, Misty.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. I'm having technical issues over here. I don't know what's going on, but thank you for taking up the slack. I appreciate it. So our next question from the chat room says, it seems Collin County is underreporting COVID-19 cases, 18,000 total in Dallas, only 2,400 in Collin County. Any reflection on this issue, even through county government, but in respect to state representation? So Lorenzo, you go first.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I apologize.
Sure, I'm sorry. It seems Collin County is underreporting COVID-19 cases, 18,000 total in Dallas and only 24,050 in Collin County. Do you have any reflection on this issue, even though county government, but in respect to state representation? I'm not exactly sure what they're saying there, but.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The numbers are being underreported. I've spoken with Dr. Khan in Frisco out of Well Health. He has confirmed that with me. They filed more positive cases than were reported by the county several times. So based upon that, and a few other doctors I've spoken with as well, telling me the same thing, leads me to believe that the medical professionals are right and are County government is not being truthful. I don't know what we can do. All I can ask is that we continue to test people. It is so important that we can test people as much as possible and as many times as possible, so we can make sure that we get a control of where it's spreading and how it's spreading, in order to try to stem some of the, the outbreaks that we're seeing around the state right now.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. From the beginning, one of the problems we've seen here in Collin County is a lot like what we've seen at the state level, both from Republican leaders, and that's mixed messaging about what should and should not be going on. We've seen the Governor Abbott and also the county judge, Chris Hill, kind of kick the can downwards and leave responsibility for taking definitive action to protect the public health and safety. They've been kicking it down, Governor Abbott to the localities, and then at the county level early on, it was left to the mayors. The county judge would refuse to impose a uniform policy for Collin County. And I mean, I heard all sorts of different stories from people. I mean, everyone was like, oh, I can do whatever I want because my job's essential. That was something I heard early on that I found very frustrating. So that was definitely a problem. And so it's the mixed messaging that has been problematic for me. And it's inconsistent policies. So Collin County was tracking and reporting its numbers on its own for a little while. Then it turned that responsibility over to the state, and now it's taken it back. And so part of the inconsistency is the fact that nobody knows who's in charge. Again, there is this lack of leadership, this back and forth that is problematic. But we need leaders at the state level and the county level that are ensuring that we have adequate testing, that people know where they can get tested, and they can get tested for a reasonable price. We have PPE, people wear face masks, and adequate hospital beds.
Thanks, Tom. Lorenzo, do you have a 30-second rebuttal?
Yeah, we need to, it's a complete lack of leadership from the top down. Our federal government had a month warning to try to get ready for COVID-19 and essentially did nothing. And we saw the same things coming from our county level and our state level representatives, providing inadequate information, things that were not adding up. So people started getting confused. And now we see our governor out there every day begging people to wear masks, but still has refused to enforce a mask requirement. And we're going to continue to see these kind of outbreaks until we start electing leadership that is going to stand up and fight for people and, make sure that they're telling them the information that's going to keep them safe. So that's where I am right now. I'm just really disappointed in the leadership and the fact that they've been able to confuse people. And yeah, it's been a mess.
Okay. Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, and I just want to talk about why it matters that we have clear and decisive leadership and clear messaging. As many of you know, I lost my dad to COVID in April, and he was hospitalized for another reason, and he got the coronavirus and COVID in the hospital at a time when they were not wearing masks. If there had been a mask policy, if they were undertaking proper procedures, he may not have passed. And there's tens of thousands of other people that could be like that if masks were mandated. I've been helping a local shelter find testing as well. I've run out of time, but access to testing is critical, and it has to be affordable.
Well, I think most of us on this call will agree with you, Tom. Thank you very much. So I think that's all of our questions. Thank you all for attending. We both candidates will have a 3-minute closing, and we will start with you, Tom.
And thank you all for coming here tonight. Thank you for caring about your community and this race. And thank you to Richardson area Dems, Plano area Dems, and WOW Dems for hosting this event. When we started and I opened, I talked about my values and I said how they're under attack. And fundamentally, it's about how we treat each other. I believe we have a duty to one another. But in order to bring about the change that we so desperately need, we need leaders who show up and who have the ability to get things done. I'm the candidate who shows up. I've been showing up on doorsteps for years, asking local voters to vote for Democrats like Mark Ferris, Sharon Hirsch, Lori Birch, Colin Allred, Ann Backus, and Beto. I've been showing up at Democratic Party events for years, helping run the convention in 2018 and staff events. I've been showing up at protests, marches, and vigils for the last several weeks, standing with those calling for justice and saying Black Lives Matter. I've shown up at the Juneteenth event just this past weekend. I've been showing up at Chamber of Commerce meetings, NAACP meetings, LULAC meetings, city council meetings, and school board meetings. I've been building the relationships that are necessary to get things done, and I've been studying the issues. I can get it done. It's going to take working with 149 other members of the Texas House to get things done. I worked in Congress where I fought for jobs, where I fought for immigrants. I fought to protect the environment and to help veterans and so much more. I built bipartisan coalitions to bring about regulatory reform. I helped negotiate the inclusion of provisions in laws and enact legislation and keep our airports safe. It is my ability to get things done that I've learned and practiced as a congressional aide, but I can also fight. I'm a lawyer who's been fighting for his clients in the courtroom for the last 14 years, and I can't wait to take the fight to Jeff Leach in November, expose his terrible record, and to win this race and to serve this community. It's my experience, my qualifications, the fact that I've been showing up for so long, that we took first place in the primary, why we have the endorsement of a supermajority of the precinct chairs in this district, which I am very proud of. These are the people who are coming to events, vetting the candidates, and talking with their neighborhoods. We have the endorsements of so many others like the Dallas Morning News and the Texas Parent PAC. I'm proud of that. I have the experience, the skills, the knowledge, and the relationships to get it done. My name is Tom Adair, and I ask for your vote in the July 14th Democratic primary runoff. If you want better, I hope you'll vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Lorenzo, your closing statement, please.
Hello, again, thank you, everybody. Huge thank to all the organizations who hosted this event and for everyone who's staying plugged into this race and the race to flip the Texas House this year. After my employment in Denver, I came home back to Texas with a new understanding about what it meant to serve my community and how I could make that happen here in my own very backyard. I want to fight for my mother who's in cancer remission, for my niece Victoria who has epilepsy, and for everyone and my friends and family within my community, and give them the kind of representation that I think they deserve. If my sister can stay up till 5 o'clock in the morning at the hospital with her daughter and still get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I can give up a few years of my life to make sure I can get things done for us in Austin. I have the experience. I've never worked for a Republican congressman, but I do have experience that represents the democratic values that we hold. I have experience in licensing guards who carry firearms on duty and kept those also away from those who could cause harm to themselves and to society. I've tackled issues related to housing and the harms that can be caused by gentrification. I also have licensed cannabis and taxed the dispensaries, and have also closed dispensaries that ignored the law and placed the health and safety of the public at risk. I also worked on drug education programs in order to help educate and keep controlled substances out of the hands of children. I have experience helping small businesses get off the ground by providing them the information and knowledge they needed to get started, from zoning to health department to the fire department and everything in between. This is something that I've been doing for a long time, being of service, wanting to help my community. But I can't do this alone. We have to band together so that we can speak out in numbers. We need to organize so we can win this election. I don't just want to win this election. I want to get to Austin so that people that rely on me can hold me accountable, and then hold me accountable so I find solutions to the problems that are facing our community. I want to thank all of our volunteers from across the country, my friends, my family here locally, for the work and dedication that keeps me motivated even during hard times. I also want to thank donors from every district, state, and territory from across the US who believe in our campaign, and also about the opportunities of what we can get done here in Collin County. I'll just wrap up real quick. Please join us. Join me, because in order for us to bring about real change, we're going to need everybody's help on board. Donate, volunteer, like us on social media, visit our website, lorenzofortexas.com, and let's bring it home in July and then again in November. Now is the time to be brave. Now is the time to be bold, and we can do this together. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo and Tom. This is, like I said, when I started off this call, this is a very hot race because it is so winnable. We really believe that we can flip this district. HD67 is going to be flipped to blue. I really believe that. Thank you to WOW Dems, Plano area Democrats, and Richardson area Democrats. We really appreciate everything. This has been a great session. Everybody, see you at the polls. Vote blue in 2020. And thank you again. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Great debate, everybody. Wow, I loved it.
Wonderful.
Great seeing everyone. Thank you so much all.